Hello, welcome to my Twitch stream. Today I'm going to be reading this book, continuing on from the last place we left off. I'm taking a break from Hot Topics and I'm just reading a book just for the nostalgia vibes. I was really into child horror when I was learning how to read. Goosebumps was my favorite series. And I also noticed that since I've been very opinionated on the social media platforms, I'm not getting as much views and I'm still taking a break from Instagram. Instagram feels more conservative. I've been running into TikTokers explaining how they're getting shadow banned because they're pro Free Palestine. And this morning I made a stitch of someone's video, but it only got like one view and one comment. I have a feeling the original poster's video got shadow banned, which is why mine got flagged. And he was basically talking about the draft, and I went on like a tangent. And the reason why I talk about political stuff is because it affects everybody. You may not think that it has nothing to do with you, but the world has gotten so much smaller because of the internet that anything that happens in the world affects us in one way or another. It's like the butterfly effect. I have a couple of videos that was pre-recorded. Some of them were like unboxings for stuff that I needed around the place. Whenever there's a crazy event going on like that, it just doesn't feel appropriate to talk about anything else. I don't know. So that's why I've been very vocal on the internet about like my politics. I have like, my regular content ready to go, but it's just been on hold because I'm so distracted with the world events. It's important to speak up and share your opinion. I also want to have fun as well. As a viewer of content creators, I never understood why people would make separate channels. Why not just put it all in on one thing? But now I could see how it can help keep things more organized because merging the two is kind of like messing with my flow a little bit. But sometimes I can't help but share how I feel, especially if it's something intense. I've been writing like all day. This is my first time like really talking. Just been on the computer just for 4-5 hours, and I've reached a point where I feel like I need to take a break, just walk away from it, from the writing, and then come back with a fresh mind. That's one cool thing I really like about writing is you can go back and edit it. It's not like talking where you can, whatever you say, it's just there. You can't like go back and edit it unless you're doing a video. And if you have dyslexia, sometimes you don't realize you say the wrong word until like after the fact. And I notice that when I'm talking about something that makes me emotional, I don't speak very well. My dyslexia gets bad. I also really like doing these readings. I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the book. Take me somewhere else besides here. It's one good thing about fiction is it will take you away from reality, and it's a healthy way to escape reality. I'm at page 30. Here's the illustration. I'm also going to post these on YouTube, but I'm not going to go longer than an hour because I have a MacBook Air and it doesn't have a lot of memory on it. Like I have the least expensive one, And so once my laptop's memory gets full, I have to move things to my hard drive. Let me show you my hard drive. I don't know. This is my hard drive that I use, and it's 1 terabyte, and it was pretty inexpensive. I got it from Walmart for like $20, I want to say. It's crazy how cheap hard drives are. And so, since I'm limited on space, it's not like I can keep going for longer than an hour if I intend to turn this into a YouTube video later on. But I would like to make longer videos in the future, but I'm still new, so it's not even like a big deal. I have the basics, which is what I need. It was such a long intro. I feel like one of those college professors who talk about themselves for like 20 minutes before class starts, and the class is like an hour long. The story is called Harold. When it got hot in the valley, Thomas and Alfred drove their cows up to a cool green pasture in the mountains to graze. Usually they stayed there with the cows for 2 months. Then they brought them down to the valley again. The work was easy enough, but it was boring. All day the 2 men tended to their cows. At night they went back to the tiny hut where they lived. They ate supper and worked in the garden and went to sleep. It was always the same. Then Thomas had an idea that changed everything. "Let's make a doll the size of a man," he said. "It would be fun to make, and we could put it in the garden to scare away the birds." "It should look like Harold," Alfred said. Harold was a farmer they both hated. They made the doll out of old sacks stuffed with straw. They gave it a pointy nose like Harold's and tiny eyes like his. Then they added dark hair and a twisted frown. Of course, they gave it Harold's name. Each morning, on their way to the pasture, they tied Harold to a pole in the garden to scare away the birds. Each night they brought him inside so he wouldn't get ruined if it rained. Reminds me of my pumpkins the other day. I had to bring them inside so they wouldn't get wet. When they were feeling playful, they would talk to him. One of them might say, "How are the vegetables growing today, Harold?" Then the other, making believe he was Harold, would answer in a crazy voice, "Very slowly." They both laughed, but not Harold. Whenever something went wrong, they took it out on Harold. They would curse at him, even kick him or punch him. Sometimes one of them would take the food if they were eating, which they were both sick of, and smeared it on the doll's face. "How do you like that stew, Harold?" he would ask. "Well, you'd better eat it, or else." Then the 2 men would howl with laughter. One night, after Thomas had wiped Harold's face with food, Harold grunted. "Did you hear that?" Alfred asked. "It was Harold," Thomas said. "I was watching him when it happened. I can't believe it." "How could he grunt?" Alfred asked. "He's just a sack of straw. It's not possible." "Let's throw him in the fire," Thomas said. "And that will be that." "Let's not do anything stupid," said Alfred. "We don't know what's going on. When we move the cows down, we'll leave him. For now, let's just keep an eye on him." So they left Harold sitting in a corner of the hut. They didn't talk to him or take him outside anymore. Now and then the doll grunted, but that was all. After a few days, they decided there was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe a mouse or some insects had gotten inside Harold and were making those sounds. So Thomas and Alfred went back to their old ways. Each morning they put Harold out in the garden, and each night they brought him back into the hut. When they felt playful, they joked with him. When they felt mean, they treated him badly as ever. Then one night, Alfred noticed something that frightened him. "Harold is growing," he said. "I was thinking the same thing," Thomas said. Maybe it's just our imagination, Alfred replied. We have been up here on this mountain too long. The next morning, while they were eating, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut. He climbed up on the roof and trotted back and forth like a horse on its hind legs. All day and all night long he trotted like that. Nice to see you back too. I'm doing good. Just filling up the time. Hope you're having a good spooky season. Reading a book today. I hope you enjoy. It's one of my favorite books when I was a kid. Let's see. I'll start right here. Okay. I was thinking the same thing, Thomas said. Maybe it's just our imagination, Alfred replied. We have been up here on this mountain too long. The next morning, while they were eating, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut. They climbed up on the roof and trotted back and forth, like a horse on its hind legs. All day and all night long he trotted like that. In the morning, Harold climbed down and stood in the far corner of the pasture. The men had no idea what he would do next. They were afraid. They decided to take the cows down into the valley with a V, that same day. When they left, Harold was nowhere in sight. They felt as if they had escaped a great danger and began joking and singing. But when they had gone only a mile or two, they realized they had forgotten to bring the milking stools. Neither one wanted to go back for them, but the stools would cost a lot to replace. There really is nothing to be afraid of, one told another. After all, what could a doll do? They drew straws to see which one would go back. It was Thomas. I'll catch up with you, he said, and Alfred walked towards the valley. When Alfred came to a rise in the path, he looked back for Thomas. He did not see him anywhere, but he did see Harold. The doll was on the roof of the hut again. As Alfred watched, Harold kneeled and stretched out a bloody skin to the dry sun. Ew. The next story is called The Dead Hand. The village huddled on the edge of the vast swamp. As far as one could see, there were soggy meadows, holes filled with black water, and glistening sheets of wet, spongy peat. Skeletons of giant trees, snags, and people called them, rose up out of the muck, their dead branches reaching out like long, twisted arms. During the day, the men in the village cut the peat and hauled it home to dry and sell for fuel. But when the sun went down and the wind, sighing and moaning, came in from the sea, the men were quick to leave. Strange creatures took over the swamp at night, and some even came into the village. That's what everyone said. People were so afraid. They would not go out alone after dark. Young Tom Pattison was the only person in the village who did not believe in these creatures. On his way home from work, he'd whisper to his friends, "There's one," and they would jump and run, and Tom would laugh and laugh. Finally, some of his friends turned on him. "If you know so much," they said, "go back into the swamp some night and see what comes of it." "I'll do it," said Tom. "I work out there every day. Not once have I ever seen anything to frighten me. Why should it be different at night? Tomorrow night I'll take my lantern and I'll walk out to the willow snag. If I get scared and run, I'll never make fun of you again." The next night the men went to Tom Pattison's house to see him on his way. Thick clouds covered the moon. That is so creepy. It was the blackest of nights. When they arrived, Tom's mother was pleading with him not to go. "I'll be all right," he said. "There's nothing to be afraid of. Don't be foolish like the rest." He took his lantern and, singing to himself, headed down the spongy path toward the willow snag. Some of the young men wondered if Tom wasn't right. Maybe they were afraid of things that did not exist. A few decided to follow him and see for themselves, but they stayed far behind in case he ran into trouble. They were sure they saw dark shapes moving about, but Tom's lantern kept bobbing up and down, and Tom's songs kept floating back to them, and nothing happened. Finally, they caught sight of the willow snag. There was Tom, standing in the circle of light, looking this way and that. All of a sudden, the wind blew out the lantern, and Tom stopped singing. The men stood shock still in the blackness, waiting for something awful to happen. The clouds shifted, and the moon came out. Sounds like the moon tonight. The moon looks so pretty. There was Tom again, only now he had his back pushed against the willow snag, and he had his arms out in front of him, as if he were frightening something off. From where the men stood, it looked like dark shapes were swirling in and around him. Then the clouds covered the moon again. Once more, it was as black as pitch. When the moon came out again, Tom was hanging on the willow snag with one arm. His other arm was stretched out in front of him as if something was pulling it. It looked to the men as if a rotting, moldy hand with no arm, a dead hand, had grabbed Tom's hand. With one final wrench, whatever had a hold of Tom jerked him into the muck. That's what the men said. When the clouds blotted out the moon once more, the men turned and ran through the blackness towards the village. Again and again they lost the path and fell into the muck and water holes. In the end, they crawled back on their hands and knees, but Tom Pattison was not with them. In the morning, the people searched everywhere for Tom. Finally, they gave him up for lost. A few weeks later, toward the evening, the villagers heard a cry. It was Tom's mother. She was rushing down the path from the swamp, shouting and waving. When she was sure the villagers had spotted her, she turned and ran back off. Off they went after her. They found young Tom Pattison by the willow snag, groaning and gibbering as if he had lost his mind. He kept pointing with one hand at something only he could see. Where his other hand should have been, there was nothing but a ragged stump oozing blood. The hand had been ripped clean off. Everybody said it was the dead hand that done it, but nobody really knows. Nobody will ever know, except Tom Pattison, which he never spoke another word again. It's crazy what trauma does to a person. It will leave you speechless. The next story is called Such Things Happen. When Bill Nelson's cow stopped giving milk, he called the veterinarian. There's nothing wrong with that cow, the vet said. She's just stubborn. That or some witch got a hold of her. Bill and the vet both laughed. That old hag, Addie Fitch, I guess she's in the closet. She's the closest we've got to a witch around here, the vet said. But witches have gone out of style, haven't they? And this was in the 90s. Now they're full on in style. Bill had a run-in with Addie Fitch the month before. He had hit her cat with his car and killed it. I'm really sorry, Addie Fitch, he told her. I'll get you a new cat, just as pretty, just as good. Her eyes filled with hate. I raised that cat from a kitten, she hissed. I loved her. You'll be sorry for this, Bill Nelson. Bill sent her a new cat and heard nothing more. Then his cow stopped giving milk. Next, his old truck broke down. After that, his wife fell and broke her arm. We're having a lot of bad luck, he thought. Then he thought, maybe it's Addie Fitch getting even. And then, hey, don't you believe in witches? You're just upset. But Bill's grandpa believed in witches. He had once told Bill that there was only one sure way to stop a witch from causing trouble. You find a black walnut tree, he said. You draw her picture on it. Then you mark an X wherever her heart is, and you drive a nail into the X. Every day you drive it in a little deeper. If she's causing the trouble, he said, she'll feel pain. When she can't stand it anymore, she'll come to you or send somebody and try to borrow something. If you give her what she wants, that breaks the power of the nail, and she'll go on tormenting you. But if you don't, she'll have to stop, or the pain will kill her. That's what his nice, gentle, old grandpa believed. It's pure craziness, Bill thought. Of course, his grandpa didn't have much schooling. Bill had been to college. He knew better. Then Bill's dog, Joe, a perfectly healthy dog, dropped dead just like that. It made Bill angry. Despite all of his schooling, he thought, maybe it is Addie Fitch after all. He got a red crayon from his son's room and a hammer and a nail and went into the woods. He found a black walnut tree and drew a picture of Addie Fitch on it. He made an X where her heart was, like his grandpa had said to do. With the hammer, he drove the nail a little way into the X. Then he went home. I feel like a fool, he told his wife. You should, she said. The next day, a boy named Timmy Logan came by. Addie Fitch isn't feeling well, he said. She wonders if she could borrow some sugar from you. Bill Nelson stared at Timmy in amazement. He took a deep breath. Tell her I'm sorry, I don't have any sugar right now, he said. When Timmy Logan left, Bill went back to the walnut tree and drove the nail in another inch. The next day, the boy came back. Addie Fitch is pretty sick, he said. She's wondering if you've got any sugar yet. Tell her I'm sorry, Bill Nelson said, but I still don't have any. Bill went out into the woods and drove the nail in another inch. The following day, the boy was back. Addie Fitch is getting sicker, he said. She really needs some sugar. Tell her I still don't have any, Bill answered. Bill's wife was angry. You've got to stop this, she said. If this mumbo-jumbo works, it's like murder. I'll stop when she does, he said. Toward dusk, he stood in the yard, staring at the ridge where the old lady lived, wondering what was going on up there. Then, in half darkness, he saw Addie Fitch slowly coming down the hill towards him. With her pinched, bony face and her old black coat, she did look like a witch. As she got closer, Bill saw she could barely walk. Oops. This is Addie Fitch. Maybe I'm really hurting her, he thought. He ran to get his hammer to pull the nail out, but before he could leave, Addie Fitch was in the yard, her face twisted with rage. First, you killed my cat, she said. Then you wouldn't give me a bit of sugar when I needed it. She swore at him and fell dead at his feet. I'm not surprised that she dropped dead that way, the doctor said later. She was very old, maybe 90. It was her heart, of course. Some people thought she was a witch, Bill said. I've heard that, the doctor said. Somebody I know thought Addie Fitch had witched him, Bill went on. He drew a picture of her on a tree, then drove a nail into it to make her stop. That's an old superstition, the doctor said. But people like us don't believe in that sort of thing, do we? That's a pretty specific spell. Next we have a poem. It's titled Running Wild. A young child is stolen by wild animals. For some reason, the animals raise the child instead of eating it. It learns to make sounds they make. It learns to eat, run, and kill the way they do. After a while, it only looks human. Human on the outside, wild beast on the inside. This story is titled The Wolf Girl. Travel northwest into the desert of Del Rio, Texas, and eventually you'll come to the Devil's River. In the 1830s, a trapper named John Dent and his wife, Molly, settled where Dry Creek runs into Devil's River. Dent was after beaver, which was plentiful there. He and Molly built a cabin from brush, and near it they put up an arbor to give them shade. Molly Dent became pregnant. When she said she was ready to have their child, John Dent raced on horseback to their nearest neighbors, several miles away. "My wife is having a baby," he said to the man and his wife. "Can you help us?" They agreed to come at once. As they got ready to leave, a violent storm came up and a bolt of lightning struck and killed John Dent. The man and his wife managed to find his cabin but did not arrive until the next day. By then, Molly Dent was dead too. It looked as if she had given birth before she died, but the neighbors could not find the baby. Since there were wolf tracks all around, they decided the wolves had eaten it. They buried Molly Dent and left. A number of years after she died, people began to tell a strange tale. Some swore it was a true story. Others said it never could have happened. The story begins in a small settlement a dozen miles from Molly Dent's grave. Early one morning, a pack of wolves raced in from the desert and killed some goats. Such attacks were not usual in those days, but a boy thought he saw a naked young girl with long blonde hair running with the wolves. I think this is her. Wolf girl. A year or two later, a woman came upon some wolves eating a goat they had just killed. Eating the goat with them, she claimed, was a young, naked girl with long blonde hair. When the wolves and the girl saw her, they fled. The woman said that at first the little girl ran on all fours. Then she stood and ran like a human, swiftly as the wolves. People started wondering if this wolf girl was Molly Dent's daughter. Had a mother wolf carried her off the day she was born to raise her with her pups? If so, by now she should be 10 or 11 years old. As the story is told, some men began to look for the girl. They searched along the riverbanks and the desert and its canyons. And one day it is said they found her walking in a canyon with a wolf at her side. When the wolf ran off, the girl hid in one of the canyon walls. When the men tried to capture her, she fought back, biting and scratching like an enraged animal. When they finally subdued her, she began screaming like a frightened young girl and howling like a frightened young wolf. Her captors bound her with rope, put her across a horse, and took her to a small ranch house in the desert. They would turn her over to the sheriff the next day, they decided. They placed her in an empty room and untied her. Terror-stricken, she hid in the shadows. They left her and locked the door. Soon she was screaming and howling again. The men thought they would go mad listening to her, but at last she stopped. When night fell, the wolves began howling in the distance. People say that each time they stopped, the girl howled in reply. As the story goes, the cries of wolves came from every direction and got closer and closer. Suddenly, as if a signal had been given, the wolves attacked the horses and other livestock. The men rushed into the darkness, firing their guns. High up in the wall, in the room where they had left the girl, was a small window. A plank was nailed across it. She pulled the plank off, crawled through the window, and disappeared. Years passed with no word of the girl. Then one day, some men on horseback came around the bend in Rio Grande, not far from the Devil's River. They claimed they saw a young woman with long blonde hair feeding 2 wolf pups. When she saw the men, she snatched up the pups and ran into the brush. They rode after her, but she quickly left them behind. They searched and searched, but found no trace of her. That is the last we know of the wolf girl. And it is there, in the desert, near the Rio Grande, that the story ends. That's crazy. Okay, we have a poem next. It's titled 5 Nightmares. An artist painted some pictures. A boy got a new pet. A girl went on vacation. Everything was normal. Then nothing was. Isn't it crazy how fast things can change overnight in an hour? Oh, this creepy guy kind of looks like my hair. This one is titled The Dream. Lucy Morgan was an artist. She had spent a week painting in a small country town and decided that the next day she would move on. She would go to a village called Kingston. But that night, Lucy Morgan had a strange dream. She dreamed that she was walking up a down-carved staircase and entered a bedroom. It was an ordinary room except for 2 things. The carpet was made up of large squares that looked like trapdoors, and each of the windows was fastened shut with big nails that stuck up out of the wood. In her dream, Lucy Morgan went to sleep in that bedroom. During the night, a woman with a pale face and black eyes and long black hair came into the room. She leaned over the bed and whispered, "This is an evil place. Flee while you can." Then the woman touched her arm to hurry her along. Lucy Morgan awakened from her dream with a shriek. She lay awake the rest of the night, trembling. In the morning, she told her landlady that she had decided not to go to Kingston after all. "I can't tell you why," she said, "but I just can't bring myself to go there." "Then why don't you go to Dorset?" the landlady said. "It's a pretty town and it's not too far." So Lucy Morgan went to Dorset. Someone told her she could find a room in a house at the top of the hill. It was a pleasant-looking house, and the landlady there, a plump, motherly woman, was as nice as could be. "Let's look at the room," she said. "I think you will like it." They walked up a dark, carved staircase like the one in Lucy's dream. In these old houses, the staircases are all the same, Lucy thought. But when the landlady opened the door to the bedroom, it was the room in her dreams, with the same carpet that looked like trapdoors and the same windows fastened with big nails. "This is just a coincidence," Lucy told herself. "How do you like it?" the landlady asked. "I'm not sure," she said. "Well, take your time," the landlady said. "I'll bring up some tea while you think about it." Lucy sat on the bed, staring at the trapdoors and the big nails. Soon there was a knock at the door. "It's the landlady with tea," she thought. But it wasn't the landlady. It was the woman with the pale face and the black eyes and the long black hair. Lucy Morgan grabbed her things and fled. This is fun. I like doing this. Okay, the next story is called Sam's New Pet. Sam stayed with his grandmother when his parents went to Mexico for their vacation. "We are going to bring you back something nice," his mother told him. "It will be a surprise." Before they came home, Sam's parents looked for something Sam would like. All they could find was a beautiful sombrero. It cost too much. But that afternoon, while they were eating their lunch in the park, they decided to buy the sombrero after all. Sam's father threw what was left of their sandwiches to some stray dogs, and they walked back to the marketplace. One of the animals followed them. It was a small gray creature with short hair, short legs, and a long tail. Wherever they went, it went. "Isn't he cute?" Sam's mother said. "He must be one of those Mexican hairless dogs. Sam's would love him." "He's probably somebody's pet," Sam's father said. They asked several people if they knew who its owners were, but no one did. They just smiled and shrugged their shoulders. Finally, Sam's mother said, "Maybe he's just a stray. Let's take him home with us. We can give him a good home, and Sam will love him." It is against the law to take a pet across the border, but Sam's parents hid the animal in a box and no one saw it. When they got home, they showed it to Sam. "He's a pretty small dog," said Sam. "He's a Mexican dog," his father said. "I'm not sure what kind. I think it's called a Mexican hairless. We'll find out. But he's nice, isn't he?" Oh my god, is this supposed to be the dog? I would not want to take that home. They gave the pet some dog food. Then they washed it and brushed it and combed its fur. That night, it slept in Sam's bed. When Sam awakened the next morning, his pet was still there. "Mother," he called. "The dog has a cold." The animal's eyes were running, and there was something white around its mouth. Later that morning, Sam's mother took it to a veterinarian. "Where did you get him?" the vet asked. "In Mexico," she said. "We think he's a Mexican hairless. I was going to ask you about that." "He's not a hairless," the vet said. "He's not even a dog. He's a sewer rat and he has rabies." Ew. Yuck. That's gross, dude. The next story is titled, "Maybe You Will Remember." Mrs. Gibbs and her 16-year-old daughter, Rosemary, arrived in Paris on a hot morning in July. They had been on vacation and now were returning home, but Miss Gibbs did not feel well, so they decided to rest in Paris for a few days before going on. The city was crowded with tourists. Still, they found a place to stay at a good hotel. They had a lovely room overlooking a park. It had yellow walls, a blue carpet, and white furniture. As soon as they unpacked, Mrs. Gibbs went to bed. She looked so pale that Rosemary asked to have the hotel's doctor examine her. Rosemary did not speak French, but fortunately the doctor spoke English. He took one look at Mrs. Gibbs and said, "Your mother is too sick to travel. Tomorrow I will move her to a hospital, but she needs a certain medicine. If you go to my home for it, it will save time." The doctor said he did not have a telephone right now. Instead, he would give Rosemary a note for his wife. The hotel manager put Rosemary in a taxi and, in French, told the driver how to find the doctor's house. "It will only take a while," he told her, "and the taxi will bring you back." But as the driver slowly drove up one street and down another, it seemed to take forever. At one point, Mary was sure they had gone down the same street twice. It took almost as long for the doctor's wife to answer the door and get the medicine ready. As Rosemary sat on a bench in an empty waiting room, she kept thinking, "Why can't you hurry? Please hurry." Then she heard a telephone ring somewhere in the house, but the doctor had told her he didn't have a telephone right now. What was going on? They drove back as slowly as they had come, crawling up one street and down another. Rosemary sat in the back seat, filled with dread, her mother's medicine clutched in her hand. Why was everything taking so long? She was sure the taxi driver was going in the wrong direction. "Are you going to the right hotel?" she asked. He didn't answer. She asked again, but he still didn't reply. When he stopped for the traffic light, she threw open the door and ran from the cab. She stopped a woman on the street. The woman did not speak English, but she knew someone who did. Rosemary was right. They had been driving the wrong direction. When she finally got back to the hotel. It was early evening. She went up to the desk clerk who had given them their room. "I'm Rosemary Gibbs," she said. "My mother and I are in room 505. May I please have the key?" There's one more illustration of a clock. The clerk looked at her closely. "You must be mistaken," he said. "There is another guest in that room. Are you sure you are in the right hotel?" He turned to help someone else. She waited until he was finished. "You gave us that room yourself when we arrived this morning," she said. "How could you forget?" He stared at her as if she lost her mind. "You must be mistaken," he said. "I have never seen you before. Are you sure you are in the right hotel?" She asked to see the registration card they had filled out when they arrived. "It's June and Rosemary Gibbs," she said. The clerk looked in the file. "We have no card for you," he said. "You must be in the wrong hotel." "The hotel doctor will know me," Rosemary replied. "He examined my mother when we arrived. He sent me for medicine she needs. I want to see him." The doctor came downstairs. "Here is the medicine for my mother," Rosemary said, holding it out to him. "Your wife gave it to me." "I have never seen you before," he said. "You must be in the wrong hotel." She asked for the hotel manager who had put her in the taxi. Surely he would remember her. "You must be in the wrong hotel," he said. "Let me give you a room where you can rest, and maybe you will remember where you are and where your mother is staying." "I want to see our room," Rosemary said, raising her voice. "It's room 505. But it was nothing like the room she remembered. It had a double bed, not twin beds. The furniture was black, not white. The carpet was green, not blue. There was someone else's clothing in the closet. The room she knew had vanished, and so had her mother. "This is not the room," she said. "Where is my mother? What have you done with her?" "You are in the wrong hotel," the manager said patiently, as if he were speaking to a young child. Rosemary asked to see the police. "My mother, our things, the room, they have all disappeared," she told them. "Are you sure you're in the right hotel?" they asked. This is some hardcore gaslighting. She went to her embassy for help. "Are you sure it is the right hotel?" they asked. Rosemary thought that she was losing her mind. "Why don't you rest here for a while?" they said. "Then maybe you'll remember." But Rosemary's problem was not her memory. It was what she did not know. See page 102. Oh, come on. This reminds me of the Pick an Adventure books. To go to 102. All right, let's see what's going on 102. It says go to see page 102. And here, there's a paragraph. Now, I don't think that has anything to do with the story. And then the second paragraph says, "What happened to Rosemary's mother?" When the hotel doctor saw Mrs. Gibbs, he knew at once that she was about to die. She had a form of the plague, a dread disease that killed quickly and caused frightening epidemics. If the word got out that a woman had died of the plague in the heart of Paris, there would be panic. People in the hotel and elsewhere would rush to escape. The doctor knew what the hotel's owners expected. He was to keep the case a secret, otherwise they would lose lots and lots of money. Ironically, in a real pandemic, they locked people in hotels, and no one was rushing anywhere. To get Rosemary out of the way, the doctor sent her to the other side of Paris for some worthless medicine. As he expected, Mrs. Gibbs soon died after she left. Her body was smuggled out of the hotel room into a cemetery where it was buried. A team of workmen quickly repainted the room and replaced everything in it. That is some hardcore gaslighting. The desk clerks were ordered to tell Rosemary that she was in the wrong hotel. When she insisted on seeing the room, it had become a completely different place, and of course, her mother had vanished. All those involved were warned that they would lose their job if they gave away the secret. To avoid panic in the city, the police and newspapers agreed to say nothing of the death. No police reports were filed. No news stories appeared. It was as if Rosemary's mother and her room never existed. There's like multiple versions. I'm just laughing because last minute I was like, I'll do one more story, and it's extra pages long. There's another ending, whole second page. In another version of the story, Rosemary and her mother had separate rooms. Mrs. Gibbs died during the night while Rosemary was asleep. Her body was removed, then her room was repainted and refurnished. When Rosemary could not find her mother the next morning, she was told that her mother was not with her when she checked in. After many months of searching, a friend, a relative, or the young woman herself finds someone who works in the hotel and, for a bribe, reveals what happened. This legend was the basis of a movie, So Long at the Fair, that appeared in 1950. The story was also inspired by two novels, one published as early as 1913, but the story was old even then. The writer Alexander Woollcott discovered that it had been reported as a true story in England in 1911 in the London Daily Mail, and in America in 1889 in the Detroit Free Press. It became known throughout America and Europe. Oh, it was based on a true story. That's interesting. It's kind of crazy how we survived a whole pandemic. That still blows my mind. I can't believe I experienced that in my lifetime. When I was first learning about medicine and I was like kind of curious about nursing or interested, I remember feeling very lucky because I lived in a time where I didn't have to worry about deadly diseases and we have vaccines and stuff like that. Not knowing that in 2020 you would have something like COVID and I would actually survive something like that. That is so crazy to me. I still can't believe it. Life is so crazy. And I enjoy doing this. I'm being too spicy everywhere else. So this is a nice little escape for me. Hop on here again soon. Hopefully tomorrow or the next day. Try to make it happen. I've just been very distracted with the world news. I'm going to go ahead and get ready for bed. But have a good night, and I'll stream again soon. Bye.